What is up? We are live and you guys are coming in. I'm super excited for tonight's webinar. Oh my gosh, I've been following this cat for years. I love what he's doing. He's pretty much his knowledge on IULs and annuities and the retirement game is like literally he read all those books and just put it in here, man. It's incredible. And so I'm excited for tonight's topic. As you guys are coming in, I wanted to share this is our most registered webinar that we have had in quite a while. And so you guys have been showing up. You guys have been registering like crazy. So thank you for that. I can tell you this, from a content perspective, I am confident that this will be the most valuable hour that you have spent in the last year. Again, I can tell you this, if you are looking to master the retirement game and become a master of the retirement game, you will absolutely love tonight's webinar. I can promise you that. Okay, here's what I want you to think about. Okay, before I introduce our special guest, I want you to imagine that you paid $10,000 for tonight's webinar. Fortunately, David McKnight said, "Hey, dude, let's do it for free," right? Which is amazing, and I'm gracious for that because he didn't have to. However, if you imagine that you paid 10 grand, you're going to get that much value, I can promise you that, but you're also going to focus better, take incredible notes, and be able to utilize this information afterwards as well. And so I'm going to do this. Let me bring in our special guest. Let me give him a nice introduction. I got a bunch of notes I'm going to read. David, this is incredible, man. Featured in, and he's a very humble dude, by the way. So when I go through this, he did not ask me to do this. He's probably going to be like, okay, can you hurry it up, right? However, featured in Forbes, this is your guest tonight. Featured in Forbes, New York Times, Fox Business, Bloomberg, Market Watch, CBS, CNBC, a top of the table qualifier and speaker at MDRT. His book, Power of Zero, sold over 400,000 copies. He has a full-length documentary called The Power of Zero, The Tax Train is Coming. Also wrote another book, Tax-Free Income for Life, which launched in November of 2020 and finished the week as the #3 business book in the entire world. Please help me welcome my buddy, Mr. David McKnight. How are you, sir?
Good. Thanks for having me, Cody.
Thank you, man. I look up to you. I love getting to spend time with you, and I truly appreciate you spending some time with us tonight. So thank you.
Well, thanks. Thanks for having me. I'm anxious to be here, and it looks like we've got a great group. And you guys are going to get some core Power Zero principles. We're going to teach you how to position IUL. I tell people all the time, if all you ever talk about is IUL, you look like a life insurance salesman, and nobody hands their life savings over to an IUL salesman. So I'm going to show you how to properly position life insurance, specifically IUL, in today's webinar. I'm going to go about 35, 40 minutes. We'll open it up for questions afterwards. We're going to talk about a very special event we're having as well. And yeah, by the way, this is a very interactive presentation. So if we were doing this live, I'd be asking all you guys a lot of questions. We won't have the luxury, unfortunately, today of having you answer all my questions because that would, it would just make it last a lot longer than we intend. But as I go through my presentation, as I share my screen, I want you guys to think about the questions that I'm asking you, turn them over into your mind and sort of see what you make of them. So that said, let's jump right in. And we're going to start with a little quiz. Think, what is the highest tax bracket in the history of our country? What's the worst it's ever been? Well, the last 2 years of World War II, the highest marginal tax bracket was 94%. And that was for any dollar you made above and beyond $200,000. Now, $200,000 back then was a pretty big deal. It was about $3.2 million in today's dollars. Well, can you even think of anybody back then that made that type of money? Well, there was an actor who later became a politician. Can you think of who that was? That's right, Ronald Reagan. If you study Ronald Reagan's biography, he talks about how he never made more than 2 movies in a year. Reason being, he made about $100,000 per movie. And any dollar he made above and beyond $200,000, he only kept 6 cents on the dollar. And truth be told, he didn't even get to keep the 6 cents. Who do you think got the 6 cents? Not Nancy, not his agent. It actually went to the state of California to pay for state tax. So it literally did not make sense for Ronald Reagan to work past the month of June. Well, let's fast forward to the decade of the 70s. What was the worst federal marginal tax bracket you could pay throughout the entire decade of the 70s? Well, this one's easy to remember. Throughout the entire decade of the 70s, worst federal marginal tax bracket you could pay was 70%. Once again, for any dollar you made above and beyond $200,000. Now, let's fast forward to today, 2024. What is the highest marginal tax bracket today? The tax rate at which Bill Gates pays taxes on most of his earned income. That's 37%. Well, here's my question for you, and this is not a trick question. How does 37% stack up against some of these tax rates we experienced in the past? What do you think? You might be thinking it's pretty low. And it's interesting you should say that because I do this workshop all across the country. And I routinely ask rooms full of people, hey, how bad are taxes today? And what do you think they say? They say terrible, horrible, as bad as they've ever been. Well, what's the truth? The truth is that taxes today are just about as low as we've seen in our lifetime. However, something's going to happen to that tax bracket January 1st, 2026. Is it going to go up or is it going to go down? Well, it's going to go up. What's it going to go up to? It's going to go up to 39.6. And guess what? In order for that to happen, all Congress has to do is nothing. Is Congress pretty good at doing nothing? You bet they are. Well, is 39.6 enough to keep me awake at night? 39.6 is what tax rates were throughout the entire decade of the 90s. I don't know if how many of you guys remember what the stock market was doing in the 90s. It was doing great. In fact, if you dropped $100,000 into the S&P 500 in 1990, took a nap for 9 years, woke up in 1999, anybody want to take a stab at what that 100,000 would have been worth? It would have been worth about $600,000. So your money would have sextupled during the decade of the 90s alone. And that's under these types of tax rates. So again, not enough to keep me awake at night. But the real question I have for you is what is likely to happen to tax rates beyond 2026 as we move forward in time to 2028, 2030 and beyond? What does your gut tell you? Are tax rates down the road likely to be higher or lower than 39.6? For those of you who say higher, I think I'm with you. The question is, what's going to be driving those tax rates higher? What is the government going to be spending money on? What are the big ticket items? Well, let's talk about it. We can't talk about the fiscal outlook of our country without first mentioning the debt. How much debt do we owe? Well, we owe about $34 trillion. We owe some of that to ourselves. We borrowed some of it from Social Security, but who else do we owe a lot of that money to? We owe it to China. Well, I don't know if you guys realize, but just recently the U.S. Treasury came out with a new $100 bill. I don't know if you guys saw that. I think it's because China's got all the old ones. It's a little national debt humor for you there. Well, what's really driving the debt? We got Medicare, we got Medicaid, Social Security. COVID blew a $6 trillion hole in our economy. Pensions. The other day a lady comes up to me. She says, Dave, I asked her, I said, what happens to your pension if your company goes broke? She says, don't worry. No matter what happens to my company, the federal government promises that they will always send me 2/3 of my pension every year till I die. Folks, that's what we call an unfunded obligation. What's an unfunded obligation? It's a promise the federal government's made that they can't afford to keep. Some experts say that what the federal government's promised that they can't afford to pay is about $125 trillion. But there's a very famous economist by the name of Dr. Larry Kotlikoff out of Boston University, foremost expert in the world on what we call fiscal gap accounting. What he does is he projects out over the next 75 years everything that we promise to pay for Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, interest on the debt. He projects out over that same time period what we can actually afford to deliver under today's tax rates. And he says, guess what? If there's a difference between those two numbers, then your country has a fiscal gap. And that's its true national debt. He says the true national debt's not 34 trillion. It's not even 125 trillion. He says it's much closer to 239 trillion. What does that mean? That means we would have to have $239 trillion sitting in a bank account today, earning treasury rates to be able to deliver on everything we've promised that we can't afford to pay. And the list goes on and on and on. But if you had to pick two things on this list that will make debt go up more than any two other things, which two would you pick? Well, if you said Medicare and Social Security, you'd be absolutely correct. Let's see if we can wrap our brains around why. I'm going to open up a brief parentheses on Social Security alone. Can anybody tell me when Social Security was first invented? When did they first roll out Social Security? Well, it was 1935. And back then, when they first started out, how many workers contributed to Social Security for every one person that took money out? What did that ratio look like? Oh, it was an amazing 42-1. You had 42 workers putting money in for every one person that took out. And back then, how old did you have to be to draw on Social Security? Well, you couldn't touch it until age 65. Well, does anybody want to take a stab at what the average life expectancy was back then? It was only 62. They didn't even anticipate that the average person would live long enough to ever draw on Social Security. If you were lucky enough to make it to 65, how long did you draw on Social Security before you tipped over dead? Only a couple of years. So in summary, when Social Security first started out, you had all these people putting money in, hardly anybody taking money out. And when they took it out for 2 years and they died. Was Social Security pretty solvent when it first started out? You bet it was. Set up to last forever. And then something happened. Soldiers came home from World War II and they started to do something at a rate at which they'd never done it before. What'd they start doing? They started to have babies. In fact, if you look at demographic trends over the last 100 years or so, they look a little bit like this. You start off at the turn of the century with what we call the Henry Ford generation. Tom Brokaw called these folks the greatest generation, followed up by what we call the silent generation, still sort of reeling from the Great Depression. And then what do we call this big statistical anomaly in the middle here? Well, these are our baby boomers. How many baby boomers do we have in our country? Almost 80 million, single largest voting bloc in the country. You'll see why that's important here in a second. Now, did baby boomers have a few children of their own? Yes, the operative word is few. They had a few kids. We call that Generation X. I am a Generation Xer, and then we had children of our own. We call that Generation Y. I've got 7 kids. That's exactly what I asked myself in the middle of the night. A little 7-kid humor for you there. Now, as you look at this chart, the baby boomers, these folks in the middle, did they have nearly as many children as their parents did? The answer is no. They had almost 30 million fewer children. So if you were to ask yourself today, how many workers are putting money into Social Security for every one person that takes money out? What does that ratio look like today? Well, it's a little bit less than 3 to 1. In another 10 years, it's going to look like 2 to 1. And what's the earliest you can draw on Social Security today? Well, you can't touch it till 62. But if you start touching it at 62, how long will you continue to draw before you tip over dead? Try 23 years or until age 85. Folks, it's Social Security today just a little bit different than when it first started out. You bet it is. It started off as insurance against living too long, and it slowly morphed into this pension program that covers us for nearly a quarter of our lives. Well, how many of you guys have heard of this guy right here, David Walker? David Walker was what we call the Comptroller General of the federal government. What does that mean? That means he was the head of the Government Accountability Office. He's on the board of Social Security. He's the nation's chief auditor. He's basically the CPA of the USA. He did that for 10 years under Bush and Clinton. The reason I'm telling you this is because David Walker knows more about these numbers than just about anyone else on the planet. And he took one look at the books and he said, hey, we have promised way more than we can afford to deliver. He says, you think Social Security is bad. He says, Medicare is 5 times more expensive. He said, to be able to deliver on these 2 promises alone, he said this back in 2008, he said, we would have to double taxes immediately. He said, you don't have to double taxes immediately, but for every year that you postpone doubling taxes, the national debt will grow by $2 trillion per year, on average, each and every year, until we hit this magical moment in our country when we have $53 trillion of debt. Folks, what's wrong with a country that has $53 trillion of debt? Well, did you know that if we had $53 trillion of debt, that most all the revenue flowing into the U.S. Treasury at that point would only be enough to pay the interest on all that debt, let alone any principal, let alone a single dollar for Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, or anything else we listed on the screen. David Walker was so concerned about this that in 2008, he resigned and started to crisscross the country, raising the warning cry to whoever would listen. And in 2010, he wrote a book called Come Back America, in which he sort of diagnosed the problem. And he appeared on NPR to talk about the book. And he told the radio show hostess, he said, hey, look, tax rates have to double or we go broke as a nation. And she didn't believe him. So he says, look, I can give you one 4-letter word to explain why tax rates have to double. And she couldn't guess what it was. So they opened up the phone lines and people started to call in and nobody could figure out what the one 4-letter word was to explain why tax rates have to double. They heard debt, they heard kids, they heard jobs, they heard fear. One guy even said health. I said H-E-A. No, it's definitely not that. Anybody know that 4-letter word that explains why tax rates have to double? That's right. It's math. What did David Walker mean by math? Well, basically what he's saying is saying, look, if this is what you're spending and this is what's coming in, you either have to double what's coming in, cut in half what's going out, or some combination of the two. It's simple math. I remember I was given the same presentation 2 days before midterm elections in a little city called Fond du Lac, Wisconsin. And when I was done, everyone came up to me and they said, Dave, who should we vote for? Who should we vote for? And I never felt so powerful. And I said, you know what? It doesn't matter who you vote for because whoever gets elected is going to inherit a math problem, the solution to which involves either doubling taxes, reducing spending by half, or some combination of the two. All right, let's get serious, folks. How many of you guys watch cartoons? Well, if you do, you've probably seen this guy right here, right? The Roadrunner. Well, who's always trying to kill the Roadrunner? That's right, Wile E. Coyote. Super genius, right? Well, a couple of years ago, I was watching the Roadrunner. And in this particular episode, the coyote was trying to kill the Roadrunner. He's building a bomb with which to do so. And what company makes his bombs? That's right, Acme. So he's building a bomb made by Acme inside a shed that was also made by me. And he was so focused and so intent on finishing this bomb that he didn't realize that the Roadrunner had pushed his shed onto a train track. Maybe you guys have seen the episode. And he was so focused and so intent on finishing this bomb that he also didn't realize until the last possible moment that there was a huge freight train bearing down on him. Now, very important question, most important question I'm going to ask tonight. If you guys found yourselves on a train track with a huge freight train bearing down on you, what would you do? Well, you probably get out of the way, right? You haul yourself to safety. Well, let's go back to the coyote. The coyote sees this huge freight train bearing down on him. And instead of jumping out of the way, what does he do? He simply pulls down the window shade, thinking that the act of doing so would make the problem go away. Well, did the problem go away? No, there's a huge explosion. And does the coyote ever really die? No, it's frustrating, right? But as the smoke and fire cleared away, you could see him sort of limping off screen, very much the worse for wear. Well, why did we gather here tonight to talk about the Roadrunner? Well, as Americans who do most of our saving for retirement and what we call tax-deferred vehicles like 401ks and IRAs, we have a very real freight train that's bearing down on us. And it's bearing down on us in the form of what? In the form of higher taxes. And we got a couple of choices of what we can do about it. We can pretend like the problem doesn't really exist. We can pretend like the math to which David Walker refers doesn't really add up. But isn't that a little bit like pulling down that window shade? Or we can implement some strategies starting right now that can help remove us from the train tracks, thereby insulating and buffering us from the impact of higher taxes. So what we're going to do in the balance of our time is we're going to talk about some of those strategies you can utilize starting right now to help get your clients and prospects off the tracks. And to do so, we're going to talk about just an example client, Mr. and Mrs. Jones. They're 50 years old. They make $100,000 per year and they want to retire at 65. Now, there's one thing I can guarantee about this couple. It's not going to fit any of your clients perfectly, but I can guarantee that everything we talk about as an example will apply. There'll be at least one thing that applies to just about everybody that you talk to. Now, before we get into their example, we got to acknowledge that there's millions of different types of investments out there, but all of those investments basically fit into only 3 types of accounts. And tonight we're going to talk about those accounts in terms of buckets of money. The first bucket we're going to talk about is what we call the taxable bucket, meaning every year as your money grows, you get to pay a tax. These are your savings accounts, CDs, money market, stocks, bonds, mutual funds. How can you tell if you have a taxable investment? Every year at the end of the year, the financial institution sends you that little love letter. It's called a 1099. Says your money grew this much. Now you got to give a portion of that money back to the IRS in the form of taxes. These are great for emergency funds. So you want to have about 6 months worth of basic living expenses. Second bucket, this is what we call the tax deferred bucket, meaning you don't pay taxes as your money grows. When do you pay the tax? At the very end, when you take the money out. These are your 401ks, 403bs, SAP simples. You guys get the idea. Now, they got 2 things in common. First thing they have in common, generally speaking, is when you put money in, you get a tax deduction. Second thing they have in common is the manner in which they're taxed upon distribution. What do we call that income when you take it out? You call it ordinary income. So that's a little bit like going into a business partnership with the IRS. And every year they get to vote on what percentage of your profits they get to keep. Not a very good business partnership, if you ask me. And the last one we'll talk about is tax-free. And what we're talking about with tax-free, there's a way that we define true tax-free investments. And that's they've got to be free from state tax, federal tax, capital gain tax. That's the first requirement. Second thing is when you take money out of a true tax-free investment, it should not count as provisional income. What is provisional income? Provisional income is the income the IRS tracks to determine if they are going to tax your Social Security. True tax-free investments do not count against the thresholds which cause Social Security taxation. So the example I'm going to give you tonight is Mr. and Mrs. Jones. They got $500,000 in their IRA. They've got $100,000 in some plain old taxable mutual funds in their taxable bucket. That's their emergency fund. They're putting 10% into their 401k, but they're getting no match. They're getting no free money. They're paying $2,000 per year for some term life insurance, and they're paying $4,000 per year for some long-term care insurance. Well, if this couple were to walk into a traditional tax-deferred paradigm financial advisor's office, how would the conversation go? Well, it just so happens I've been training traditional tax-deferred financial advisors for the last 25 years of my life. And in the act of doing so, I have sat in their offices and I've listened to them as they've spoken to people like this for the very first time. And here's how the conversation goes. Mr. and Mrs. Jones, congratulations. You've done a great job saving money in this IRA. The problem is last year down the road at XYZ company, you only earned 7%. We think we can get you 8. So roll all that money over to us. As far as your mutual funds go, that's a great emergency fund. Problem is last year down the road, you only earned 3%. We think we can get you 5. So let us manage that for you as well. As far as your 401k with no match goes, keep on doing it. And when you switch jobs, give us a call. We'll roll that 401k into that IRA, get everything under one roof, maybe save you some break points, save you some fees. And as far as your term life insurance and long-term care insurance goes, gosh, not really what we do, but who are we to say you shouldn't keep doing it? And this is a conversation I've heard literally dozens and dozens of times. Well, when someone like this walks into my office for the very first time, I see red flags all over the place. For example, I'm not so much concerned with what's in this IRA today. What keeps me awake at night is what this IRA is going to be worth 15 years from now if it grows at 8% per year. What is this IRA going to be worth 15 years from now if it grows at 8% per year? Try 1.6 million. Folks, I know this sounds great, but what's wrong with having 1.6 million in your tax-deferred bucket? Did you know that if you had 1.6 million in your tax-deferred bucket, that required minimum distributions alone would put you in one of the higher marginal federal tax brackets and literally guarantee that your Social Security would be taxable in perpetuity, along with all of the compensating spend down that goes along with that to plug that hole in your Social Security. So what we want to do is we want to prevent this IRA from ever getting to 1.6 million. So here's my question for you. How do you prevent an IRA from growing? And don't anyone say, put it in the stock market. Well, one of my very favorite ways is to do what we call a Roth conversion. Now, a Roth conversion simply says that if you have money sitting in your tax-deferred bucket, you can shift it to tax-free so long as you pay what along the way? So long as you pay taxes. At what rate? At whatever the rate happens to be in the year you do the conversion. So let's say that Mr. and Mrs. Jones, they have $500,000 in their IRA. They're doing, and they got to pay 40% tax on that conversion. How much tax are they going to owe on that conversion? Try $200,000. Here's the problem. Do Mr. and Mrs. Jones have $200,000 just lying around that they can earmark for the tax on that Roth conversion? The answer is no, they don't have it. So some people say, well, why not just pay that tax right out of the conversion itself? In other words, just have the IRS withhold the tax from the conversion itself. Folks, what would happen if a couple of 50-year-olds paid the tax on the Roth conversion out of the IRA itself? They get a 10% penalty. The IRS says even if you take the money out and you give it right back to the IRS in the form of a tax, if you're younger than 59 and a half when you do so, they will charge you a 10% penalty. So the rule of thumb here is unless you got a lot of money just languishing in your taxable bucket, do not do a Roth conversion until you're 59 and a half. So it begs the question, is there any other way to get money out of that IRA pre-59 and a half without penalty? Well, at this point, I may bring up that little known section of the IRS tax code called a 72T. And what a 72T says is that you can take equal yearly distributions, separate equal yearly distributions from your IRA without penalty. You will pay tax without penalty, so long as you do it in equal yearly distributions that last for at least 5 years or until 59 and a half, whichever is longer. So these days, a couple of 50-year-olds could take out about 5% per year. So if we did a 72T on that IRA, we could take out $25,000 per year, and we could contribute it to the tax-free bucket. All right, let's take a look at their mutual funds. If this is their if $100,000 is their emergency fund, how do we feel about it? Do they have too much or too little in their emergency fund? Well, if they make $100,000 per year, so they should probably have closer to $50,000. So not only do they have too much, but they're growing it in mutual funds, which means the problem's getting bigger every year. So what we want to do is we want to take the growth on that mutual fund plus some of the principal. We want to shift it from taxable to tax-free, little by little, year by year, such that by the time they reach retirement, they've got the perfect amount. I've done the math on this. This will require an annual shift from taxable to tax-free of $6,000 per year. And how do we feel about 401ks that don't have matches? Folks, this is the one thing that Susie Orman, Dave Ramsey, and Clark Howard actually agree upon. The rule of thumb when it comes to 401ks is you put in up to the match, but not one penny above and beyond. You do whatever is required to get the free money, and then you move on to the next best thing. Well, if these folks are trying to prevent their IRA from growing by doing a 72T, yet they're putting money hand over fist into their 401k and they're getting no free money, are those two strategies at odds with each other? You bet they are. So we're going to recapture that $10,000 shifted to tax-free. How do we feel about term life insurance and long-term care insurance? We feel like it's incredibly important to mitigate both of these risks, either one of which will really upset your financial apple cart in the years leading up to retirement. But we feel like sometimes there's just a better way to accomplish that. So we may free up that money as well. So how much total money did we free up on an annual basis to be able to reposition the tax-free? That all adds up to $47,000. Well, usually at this point, someone will say, hey, Dave, not so fast. you didn't really free up 47,000. I'll say, why not? And they'll say, because some of those recommendations that you made are actually taxable events. So you know what? They're right. That 72T is a taxable event. And when you put less money into your 401k, that increases your taxable income. So that's also a taxable event. So because of the strategy, we just realized an additional $35,000 of taxable income. We'll call it 30% on the margin. That's $10,500 of additional tax every year that we do this strategy. So here's my question, folks. Do Mr. and Mrs. Jones have $10,500 just lying around that they would love to earmark for that tax bill? Not that they would love. And if we say, quit going out to eat, quit going on vacation, pull back the belt a couple of notches just so you can pay that tax bill, will they return my phone calls? And the answer is no. So we got to find a way to help them pay that tax bill such that we are not encroaching on their lifestyle. So what I may recommend is that they simply pay that tax right out of the 47,000 we just freed up on the previous screen, which means we really have $36,500 freed up per year to be able to reposition to the tax-free bucket. So folks, this is where the rubber hits the road. Where can we put $36,500 per year such that it grows in a truly tax-free way? Well, at this point, I'm going to recommend that they fully fund one of my very favorite investments, and that's what we call a Roth IRA. You guys have heard of Roth IRAs? Roth IRA says that how much money can you put into a Roth IRA, by the way? If you're over age 50, 8,000 each for a total of 16,000. By the way, why do I like Roth IRAs so much? I like Roth IRAs so much because so long as you're 59 and a half when you take the money out, you don't pay any of those taxes we talked about. And when you take money out of a Roth IRA, it does not count as provisional income. It does not count against the thresholds, which cause Social Security taxation. So Roth IRAs are great. So I'm going to take from that 36.5, I'm going to subtract 16, fully fund their Roth IRAs. That leaves me with $20,500. Folks, where can I put $20,500 per year such that it grows in a truly tax-free way? Well, at this point, I may bring up a bucket of money. It gets treated differently for tax purposes than anything else we've talked about so far. What happens with this bucket is you put money in. As your money grows, your bucket begins to fill. Only the IRS says that the growth on the money in this bucket is going to be treated under a different section of the IRS tax code than anything else we've talked about so far. What does that section of the IRS tax code say? It says that you can touch this money pre-59 and a half without penalty. Can you do that in your IRA or 401k? No, you cannot. They're going to tell you that as your money grows, you receive no 1099s. What does that mean? That means no tax as your money grows. They're going to tell you that when you take money out, if you take it out the right way, it does not show up as reportable income on your tax return. That means it's tax-free and does not count as provisional income. They're also going to tell you that there are no contribution limits. What did we say were the contribution limits for the Roth IRA? $8,000 each for a total of 16,000. Folks, I got clients that do $50 a month, and I got clients that do 200,000 per year and everywhere in between. There are no limits on how much you put into this bucket. They're also going to tell you that there are no income limitations. Let me ask you this. Can Bill Gates do a Roth IRA? The answer is no, he cannot. Why? He makes too much money. You start making north of $240,000 of modified adjusted gross income, you can no longer do a Roth IRA. Those limitations do not apply to this particular bucket. And finally, this last one may be my very favorite. They're going to say, if history serves as a model, there may be no legislative risk. Well, what does that mean? Well, some people say that means they won't change the rules on this somewhere down the road. Well, guess what? They did change the rules on this bucket 3 different times, in 82, 84, and 88. And every single time they changed the rules, they simply said, hey, whoever has the bucket before the rule changes gets to keep it and continue to put money into it under the old rule for the rest of their lives. What do we call that kind of a clause? We call it a grandfather clause. Well, usually right about now, people say, well, gosh, Dave, this is like the perfect investment. It's like the perfect bucket. It's like the alignment of the stars. Why not just put all my money into there? Well, first of all, is it ever a good idea to put all your eggs into any one basket? And the answer is, of course not. But not only that, the IRS says if we're going to give you the benefit of an unlimited bucket of tax-free dollars, we're going to require that there be a cost of admission. We're going to require that there be a spigot attached to the side of this bucket through which flows on a monthly basis some expenses. And what do those expenses go towards? They go towards the cost of term life insurance. Well, let me ask you a question. If your house is paid off, your kids have moved down, you're rapidly approaching retirement, is term life insurance really all that high on your wish list? And the answer is no. It's usually right about now that people start dumping their term life insurance. And the companies that sponsor these programs recognize that. So they've done something to sweeten the pot. They simply say that in the event that somewhere down the road you should need Long-term care, they will give you your death benefit while you're alive for the purpose of paying for it. Here's an example. Let's say you got a death benefit of $400,000. You wake up one day, you can no longer feed yourself, bathe yourself, transfer yourself, what have you. Find one doctor to write one letter to that effect. They will start sending you 25% of that death benefit, or $100,000 per year, every year for 4 years for the purpose of paying for long-term care. Now, they may discount that number slightly based on the age in which you received the benefit, but the point is this: they're willing to give you your death benefit while you're alive for the purpose of paying for long-term care. I don't even know how many of you guys have looked into traditional long-term care. How many of you guys looked into traditional long-term care? Number one, is it cheap? The answer is no. It's getting more and more expensive all the time. Can it be hard to qualify? The answer is yes. You might live to be 120, but if you have a bad back, a bad hip, a bad knee, you may not even get accepted. And what happens if you pay for 30 years and die peaceful in your sleep, never having used it? Do they send you all your money back at the end? And the answer is no. It goes to pay for someone else's benefit. And that can be a source of heartburn for a lot of different people. Why is this different? This is different because if you die peaceful in your sleep 30 years from now, never having needed long-term care, someone's still getting a death benefit, probably your kids or your grandkids. So there isn't that sensation of having paid for something you hope you never have to use. By the way, have Mr. and Mrs. Jones here already bought off on the idea that they need term insurance and long-term care insurance? You bet they have. They've already budgeted for it. All we're suggesting is, instead of sending that money off to an insurance company in the form of a premium payment, why not recapture it, dump it into their bucket, let just a portion of it drip out in the form of expenses, and now take advantage of a huge bucket of tax-free dollars that wasn't previously available to you. By the way, what do we call this bucket? It's chapter 5 of my book, The Power Zero. Call it the LIRP. What do you and I call that? We call that the IUL. We call that Indexed Universal Life Insurance. By the way, why do I call it LIRP? What does that stand for? That stands for Life Insurance Retirement Plan. Why life insurance? Because the IRS says in order for this bucket to work, you got to be willing to pay for some life insurance. You got to have a need for life insurance. Why retirement plan? Because one of the ancillary goals of this bucket is to build money up so that somewhere down the road, you can take money out and spend it on your lifestyle at a period in time tax rates are likely to be dramatically higher than they are today. Okay, so that's the LIRP. Usually at this point, I like to ask the question: if you could be in any tax bracket of your choosing in retirement, which tax bracket would you choose? If you're anything like me, you want to be in the 0% tax bracket. Well, if what Mr. and Mrs. Jones want is to be in the 0% tax bracket, tell me how we're doing so far. They're going to have money coming out of their Roth IRA. So long as they're 59 and a half when they take that money out, will they pay tax? The answer is no tax. They're going to have a lot of money coming out of their LIRP, regardless of how old they are when they take that money out. Will they pay tax? The answer is no tax. Now, let's go back to that IRA. Remember that IRA, the whole goal in doing that 72T was to prevent that IRA from getting any bigger. Well, if we did a good job of preventing that IRA from getting any bigger, how much money should still be in that IRA by the time they reach 65? The answer is $500,000. So here's my question for you. Is there any way that they can take money out of that IRA at age 65, spend it on their lifestyle, not pay tax, and it's got to be legal? Well, remember, the IRS says that, hey, look, we recognize that by the time you reach retirement, your house is paid off, your kids have moved out, you're no longer contributing to that 401k. So you're probably not going to have a lot of deductions left. So guess what? In our infinite goodness, absent any of those other deductions, we will give you a deduction. We'll call that a standard deduction, which is $29,200 if you retire today. What does that mean? That means that you can realize income from any number of sources up to $29,200 if you're married without paying any taxes at all. Now, does the IRS index that number to keep up with inflation? You bet they do. Historically, they've done it by about 3% per year. So guess what? By the time these guys are 65, their standard deduction's going to be much closer to $44,445, which begs the question. But age 65, they have $44,400. What did we say that number was? $44,445 of deductions. How much could they take out of that IRA without paying any taxes at all? $44,445. What's the moral of the story here, folks? So long as you only take out up to whatever your standard deduction happens to be in any given year, you now have an IRA that's 100% tax-free. And if you have no tax, and you can stay below your provisional income thresholds, what do you suppose happens to your Social Security? No tax. And if you have no tax, no tax, no tax, no tax, what tax bracket does that put you in? 0%. Folks, why do I make such a big deal about being in the 0% tax bracket? Well, guess what? If we can't get you to the 0% tax bracket, what's the next best tax bracket? And don't anyone say 1. It goes all the way up to 10. Throw another 6% for state. Now we're talking 16. If what David Walker says comes true and tax rates have to double to keep our country solvent, now we're talking 32. And all of a sudden, second place isn't looking all that great. Now, I love it when things make sense conceptually, but I love it even more when things make sense mathematically. So what I did for Mr. and Mrs. Jones is I simply said, hey, if you had never met me, if you kept on doing exactly what you were doing, you didn't change a thing, and tax rates somehow managed to stay at 30% for the rest of your life, how much money would you be able to spend after tax? And according to my math, they'd be able to spend just shy of $4.4 million. And I know what you're thinking. That sounds like a lot. It is a lot. The problem is they run out of money at age 85, at which point they can either die or move in with their kids. Conversely, if they do everything we're talking about, we get them the 0% tax bracket, get their Social Security tax-free, we stir in some IUL, guess what? They never run out of money. They still have, they spend almost $8 million. They still have 1.4 million left over at the end. Now, more importantly, by the way, people say, hey, Dave, how could there possibly be such a big difference between these two columns? And you know what I say? I say, when you make little tiny strategic changes midway through your life and you amortize the benefit of those changes out over the balance of your life, there can be a massive quantum difference on the back end. More importantly, what happens to the column on the left if tax rates double? Does it get bigger or smaller? It gets smaller. What happens to the column on the right if tax rates double? It stays exactly the same. Why? Because if you're in the 0% tax bracket and tax rates double, 2 times 0 is still 0. Folks, that is what we call the power of 0. All right, before we go any further, I usually get a couple of different questions. And a lot of my workshops I do across the country are between, folks between the ages of 50 and 70. So the number one question they give me is, hey, Dave, am I too old to get to the 0% tax bracket? I usually respond to that question in the following way. Throughout 2018, filmmaker Doug Orchard and I crisscrossed the country interviewing all of the most important experts in the nation on the national debt as it relates to the future of tax rates. And they're all reading the same music and they're all singing the same song. They're simply saying that if we don't change course immediately, that 10 years from now, tax rates will have to rise dramatically or we go broke as a nation. Some of them even use the D word as it relates to the future of tax rates. Tax rates will have to double or we go broke as a country. So the real question in my mind is not, are you too old to get to the 0% tax bracket? The real question is, 2030 rolls around and tax rates double. Will you look back on the year 2024 and say, why did I not take advantage of tax rates while they were historically low? The second question I get is, hey, can I be in the 0% tax bracket and still be a good person? After all, if we're on the 0% tax bracket, who's going to pay for the roads? Who's going to pay for the schools? Who's going to pay for the social programs? Well, first of all, are we suggesting that Mr. and Mrs. Jones not pay tax? The answer is no. The cost of getting to the 0% tax bracket is you got to be willing to pay a tax. We're simply suggesting that when given the choice between paying taxes at today's historically low tax rates or postponing the payment of those taxes till some point in the future when tax rates are likely to be dramatically higher than they are today, you're probably better off paying them today. And the last question I get is, hey, Dave, how come I've never heard of this stuff before? And I would submit that your clients and prospects have heard of just about everything we've talked about today. The only thing that's new is probably this idea of the LIRP or the IUL. And all we're doing with the LIRP or the IUL is we're simply doing the opposite of what most people do when it comes to life insurance. What do most people do when it comes to life insurance? They get as much death benefit as they can for as little money as possible. What do we call that kind of life insurance? We call it term insurance. Here we're doing just the opposite. We're getting as little death benefit as the IRS requires of us. And we're stuffing as much money into it as the IRS allows in an attempt to mimic all of the tax-free benefits of the Roth IRA without any of the limitations of the Roth IRA. Well, why else haven't you heard about this? Well, you got to ask yourself how most major money management institutions make money. How do most major money management institutions make money? They charge you a fee. Let's call it 1%. So let's say they're managing $1 million of your dollars in the tax-deferred bucket. They're charging you 1% per year. How much are they making off you per year? $10,000. No big deal. That's how a lot of financial advisors, including me, that's how a lot of us get paid. But here's the rub. If they were to persuade you that tax rates in the future are likely to be dramatically higher than they are today, then you might just feel impressed to shift this money to tax-free. And if you shift it to tax-free, what are you going to have to pay along the way? You have to pay a tax. Let's call it 30%. So you pay that 30% tax. Now you got $700,000 in your tax-free bucket. If they're still charging you 1%, now they're only making $7,000 per year off you. Didn't they just experience a pay cut for persuading you the tax rates in the future are likely to be dramatically higher than they are today? And for that reason alone, most major money management institutions don't want to touch this conversation with a 10-foot pole. Me personally, I don't care how much money you have. The only thing that matters to me is how much you actually get to spend after tax. That is the only number that really matters. Okay, for those of you, I told you I'd keep it to 35, 40 minutes. For those of you who are taking notes, I've got 5 takeaways for you. Takeaway number 1, tax rates in the future are likely to be dramatically higher than they are today. Mathematically speaking, we have already passed the point of no return. Takeaway number 2, the only way to truly insulate yourself from the impact of higher taxes is to get to the 0% tax bracket. Why? Because if you're in the 0% tax bracket, 2 times 0 is still 0. Takeaway number 3, I've been doing this for nearly 30 years. I've helped put thousands of Americans on the road to the 0% tax bracket. I've noticed something very interesting along the way. It is nearly impossible to get to the 0% tax bracket by focusing on just one stream of tax-free income. For example, I know this is going to shock a lot of people. It's very difficult to get to the 0% tax bracket by simply doing an LIRP or an IUL. It's very difficult to get to the 0% tax bracket by simply doing a Roth IRA. To get to the 0% tax bracket typically requires between 4 and 6 different streams of tax-free income, none of which show up on the IRS's radar, but all of which contribute to you being in the 0% tax bracket. Takeaway number 4, we know as of January 1st, 2018, that taxes are on sale, but we also know that tax sale had an expiration date, 2026. What does that mean? That means every year between now and 2026 represents a little mini window of opportunity within which to take advantage of historically low tax rates. And every year that goes by where your clients and prospects fail to take advantage of those historically low tax rates is potentially a year beyond 2026 when they could be forced to pay the highest tax rates they're likely to see in their lifetime. And the last takeaway is this. All of this is really, really good news for your clients and prospects. Let me sort of share a quick story to illustrate. Not long ago, a lady came up to me at the end of my presentation. She said, "Hey, Dave, thanks a lot. Now I'm in a really bad mood." I said, "Well, why are you in such a bad mood?" She says, "Because I got all my money in the tax deferred bucket." I said, "Let me see if I understand correctly. You contributed to your tax deferred bucket at a period in time when tax rates were higher than they are today. So you got a deduction of those higher rates for doing so. You now have a 3-year period during which to get those tax deferred assets repositioned to tax free so that by the time tax rates potentially double over time, you've done all the heavy lifting. You can then take that money out tax free." I said, "Is that why you're in such a bad mood?" And she says, "Well, gosh, Dave, I never really thought about it that way." So my question for you guys is, how is this story going to end for your clients and prospects? Well, I would submit that so long as you guys take advantage of this next period of historically low tax rates, that your clients and prospects get to determine how much of their hard-earned retirement savings that they get to spend. Now, I know Cody teased at the beginning, we were going to talk about a special event. And what you guys saw here tonight is just a tiny snippet of my training on IUL. I can go for about 3 hours on how to position the IUL and how my average case size is about $20,000 to $30,000 per household. It's not massive, but it's not, it's not $50 a month either. I want to show you exactly how I take that IUL. And as you guys saw tonight, this premium was about $20,000, but I want to show you how to get that on every single one of your cases. And so what I'm sharing with you right now is what we call the Heroes of Zero event. 4 experts, 1 goal, 0 tax. I don't know if you guys recognize all those people. You should. The first guy on the left there is a guy named Ed Slott. He has been called by the Wall Street Journal, America's CPA, the leading IRA expert in the country. Of course, you got me there with the white shirt. You've got Tom Hegna. He is the leading expert in the industry on guaranteed lifetime income. He's the guy that made famous that whole maxim when you get to retirement, it's all about income, not assets. And of course, everybody knows the Michael Jordan of the life insurance industry, Van Miller. I've been friends. Van and I are fellow cheeseheads. We went to lunch all the time back in Wisconsin, so he's an old friend of mine. But guess what? These 4 people have never been on the same stage at once. May 16th and 17th, we will all be on the same stage. We will be unloading all of our most valuable strategies to you to arm you with all of the information you need to protect your clients and prospects from the impact of higher taxes. Every single one of these people on this screen believes that tax rates is going to double within the next 10 years. And we are all prepared to give you all of the training that you need to shield your clients and prospects from the impact of higher taxes, and how life insurance, particularly IUL, can play a central role in that strategy. So this is an exciting opportunity. You can see you can register at ca.heroesofzero.live. And so this is a very exciting event. It's historic. It's never happened before. All four of these guys on the same stage at once. So with that, Cody, I'm going to hand the reins back to you.
That is incredible, buddy. Phenomenal presentation. Thank you for all you're doing. And I'm super excited for your event as well. I was curious if the four of you had ever been on the same stage before. You said no, which is amazing. And it may never happen again. And so I was thinking, if I am wanting to master the retirement game, like, I'm kind of curious, those that are still on, what would you rate Dave's presentation and knowledge on IUL and retirement from a 1 to 10? 1, he doesn't know anything. 10, he knows a ton, right? And you got some hundreds and some badasses in there. That's hilarious. I love that. Also, too, let me share. I'm gonna share my screen if I can, Dave, too. I'm gonna actually walk you through a couple things. So, as Dave was talking about, Heroes of Zero Live is in 47 days, 22 hours, 16 minutes, 46 seconds. This is all about mastering the retirement game. It's at the Renaissance Nashville Hotel, May 16th and 17th, as you heard. On this page, there's a video by me talking about the event, talking about the amazing speakers that are involved. If you don't know some of these individuals, and you are in the retirement game, you absolutely need to. So we've got actual information about each individual on this page where you can learn more about them and look them up. As Dave mentioned, I've seen all of these speak. Van, I love how you said MJ of the life insurance industry. That's phenomenal. I'm going to steal that because that's amazing. Tom had Dave and I both on his new Fox Business show, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, in New York, which was pretty amazing. I think we both aired on Fox Business a couple weeks ago, which was awesome. I was super honored to be a part of that. And so that's phenomenal. Here's a couple things I wanted to mention. Okay. So if you're like, okay, what can I expect to learn? Right. Well, obviously continued IUL, really like how to become a financial planning master. There'll be a ton of amazing networking with higher level people. Advanced tax shielding tactics, cutting edge retirement strategies. Here's one of the coolest things I loved about this is they are including up for the next couple of weeks, they're including 2 nights of hotel. And Dave, I actually went to Renaissance. Obviously, you get a group rate that you're buying hotels with, but I went to the Renaissance website, and for those dates, for 2 nights, 15th through the 17th, it showed, I don't know if you can see it, but it showed $543 per night. So if you went and bought this hotel on your own, it would be $1,086. And they're including it in your registration, which is incredible. Also, all meals are included. Like, they are sparing no expense. Thursday night reception and dinner, professional networking, 14 total hours of education from 4 of the most acclaimed retirement experts in the country. This is normally $1,500. Through this specific link, it's only $997. And again, it includes 2 nights of hotel. And as you know, Nashville's booming. And so the Nashville hotel market is really expensive and crazy, but it is included here. And so you can go to this link and secure your spot. You can also add on a guest you can get your ticket for $997. You can add a guest for $497. And then they could stay with you or get their own room. And they can attend meetings and meals. And so you can actually literally go to this link and register. Here's one question I was thinking about. I'm going to paste the link again. I would love for you guys to check it out. I am curious, after everything you've learned, how many clients would you need to help with an IUL to pay back your $997 let's just assume you attend the event. Let's just assume you spend 10 days with Dave and Tom and Ed and Van, and you get 14 hours of the most top-notch retirement education you could ever get in the world. And let's just say that that happened and you did that for 2 days. How many clients or IULs would you need to help to get your $1,000 back? And the truth is, as you can see, one, if you sell them like Dave does, and it's 30 to 50K per household, well, it's like a 30th, right? Which is insane. So I would be shocked if you are looking to scale a retirement practice. I would be shocked if this is not the best investment you could ever make. And think about this, like, IUL agents, annuity agents, retirement advisors are buying leads, investing in seminars, doing different things to get in front of prospects, right? Like if you've ever purchased a lead, IUL, annuity, done a seminar, done marketing to get in front of prospects, put a me in chat. If you're like, yes, I've spent money on marketing. Yes, I've tried to get in front of people. Yes, I've invested in my business, as you should be doing, which is amazing. I know Dave and his team invest in their business like crazy, right? If that's you, which is cool, it is, that's good. If that's true, right, and you've invested in your business, now, have you ever spent $1,000 that you did not get a return on? Some special marketer with a laptop in their basement promised you the world and you spent $1,000, or you did this seminar, or you paid for this training, or you did this coaching or whatever, right? Or you did a mail drop, or you bought some internet leads and you spent $1,000 and you did not make money. If that is true, type me in chat as well. Yes, me, I spent $1,000 and I did not get my money back. And if you've ever spent $1,000 and it was a poor investment, because that happens, right, to all of us as an entrepreneur, it wasn't the first time and it's probably not gonna be the last time. However, if you've ever done that, I can assure you that you will get a return on this $1,000 for sure. And so if you're wanting to, it's kind of like Dave just said, Van is the MJ of life insurance. You guys are in the insurance industry. You're selling life insurance. You're helping consumers. You're specializing in the retirement piece of the industry, or you got on here because you want to. If you played basketball like I was when I was 10 years old, 15 years old, 20 years old in college, and I could have paid $1,000 to spend time with MJ for 2 days and get better at playing basketball, who thinks I would have spent the $1,000, or I'd have convinced my parents to spend the $1,000 to get to spend time with MJ for 2 days to become a better basketball player, right? Who thinks I would have done that? Type yes if you think that I would have probably done that, right? And the answer is 1,000% yes. And even just to speak about me for a second, like I have done everything in my power to get better and learn. And I can promise you, when I spend time with individuals like David McKnight and Tom Hegna and the other gentlemen that are going to be at this event, they deliver. Like Dave got on here for free and brought content. And whether you go to his event or not, Dave's going to be just fine. But he loves helping other advisors scale their practice. And so if I'm you and I'm wanting to master the retirement game, I am 1,000% not hesitating. I am going to ca.heroesofzero.live. I am registering for $9.97. You can add a guest if you want to or not. And I am getting my butt to Renaissance, Nashville, May 16th and 17th, simply because I want to be a professional. And this gentleman that's hanging out with you and the other three that are going to hang out with you in Nashville are absolute professionals for sure.
Also, by the way, Cody, I just want to add one other thing. I noticed somebody asked in the chat. They said, "Are we going to get any training on marketing?" And we're going to be doing hours of training on marketing, because at the end of the day, I could put all sorts of sales ideas and sales phrases and sales presentations in your hands, but if you don't have anybody to present it to at the end of the day, you're still unemployed, right? So none of this stuff really works unless you have somebody to present it to. So a lot of what we're going to be talking about is how to schedule your calendar a year in advance, how to put this message in front of the right types of people who are prepared to embrace the Power Zero paradigm. So this is going to be an unprecedented opportunity to not only get the knowledge from four of the best in the industry, but also to have a marketing program that we're going to put in your hands that's turnkey, that's going to show you precisely how to find the types of people you're looking for that are ready and willing to embrace these types of principles.
That's amazing. I don't think there'll be a virtual option. I think it's a 10 in person
It's
only.
just
Yeah.
live,
Okay.
right?
Cool. Here's one thing I was thinking about too. I assume Dave would be okay with this. I am also, just because I love what they're about. I'm confident. Like, I think you guys know me too. Like, I promoted this webinar hard because I know that, and my reputation's on the line when I bring people involved. And I know that when I work with a gentleman like David McKnight, he's going to deliver. He's going to bring value to my audience. Anything he does with them, he's going to help them. Okay. Jason just registered. Dude, I love that. That is so cool, buddy. Appreciate you doing that. I'm going to even add one more thing. If I may, for the first 10 that go to the link and register, I am also going to add a $997 fire ticket, which is the top ticket you can get, to my 8% Nation conference in July. And I'm going to add that and include that for the first 10 people that take action tonight for $997 and grab a ticket. I'll even show you the website so that you can see what I'm talking about. Okay. And this is not, dude, thank you, buddy. This is not something that we normally do, but we do this conference every single year. I need to see if I can find a way to get Dave there to speak. That'd be incredible. This is in July here in Springfield. I am going to add, you can check out, a lot of you already know some of the information. We have a fire ticket, normally $2,000 for $997. You get to sit in the first couple rows, all the stuff, all the parties, all the food, all the breakout sessions, right? It's the works. I'm going to include a $997 ticket for free for the first 10 people who register tonight, so that you will actually be getting 2 tickets for the price of 1. And you're getting your hotel in Nashville, which is unbelievable, by the way. Like, I was so impressed by that. You can add on a guest later. Yes. Deanna, yeah, we can communicate, and I can make sure that I connect you and that you're able to do that for sure. 100%. Yeah. Any questions before we do a little bit of Q&A? Any questions? And I know we're getting close on time, Dave. So if you let me know if you're okay. If you have any questions about the event, Heroes of Zero, now is the time to ask. Also, Michael Hall, dude, good to see you, buddy. He just registered. That's amazing. I am in Nashville. Do you have a discount code for your website? Well, Heroes of Zero is normally $1,500. And so
well, if they don't need the hotel, then there's an option to not get the hotel.
Oh, that's a good point. Yes. Cool. Richard, we'll check. I'll make a note of that, Rich, too.
There's a question about, can they invite 2 guests? You can. I'm not sure the website allows for it, but you would all have to be in the same hotel room. So the discount is because you're not getting an additional hotel room. So you can invite 2 guests, but you only get that discount if you're willing to sleep in the same hotel room.
Yes, good point. Also, Rich, I will make a note and get with Dave's team and make sure that we get you either a code or a separate link with no hotel, since you do live in Nashville. Bob says, thanks. Rusty says, what's the link and code to get Cody's fire ticket? Deanna Prevette says, boom, registered. That is amazing. Rusty, once you have purchased the ticket to Heroes of Zero .live, I will actually get my team to go in and register you as a fire ticket attendee to our event. And so I'll make sure the team takes care of that. Deanna Prevette, that is amazing. So Deanna, Dave, she is so impressive, is rocking it with IULs right now. She met with, I'm not going to say exactly who, but the show Bachelor. She met with a previous bachelor of that show, actually, to talk about retirement today, and he's looking for a place to place $150,000 for retirement. So she is a rock star. I literally, when we talk about this event, I'm like, Deanna Prevette has got to be there, which is amazing. That's cool. I love that. Rusty says, perfect, thanks. Absolutely. Also too, if for some reason you register and you're like, hey, I hadn't got any information about either event or haven't got my ticket to 8%, you can email me, Cody at Cody Askins. Or if you have questions, you want to talk, if I can help out in any way, I want to be able to do that and help Dave out with the Heroes of Zero event. Deanna says, help Dave. She says, help me. That's awesome. He will definitely do that. I can promise you that. Cool. Dave, any other thoughts? Any other questions for Dave?
No. This has been very gracious of you, Cody, to do this webinar. I hope people have found value. Looks like we had a question that came in.
Two questions. Do you suggest only to use IUL or a whole life with a high cash value? Second question, is it worth it to get securities licensed?
Yeah, so let me respond to that. I do prefer IUL. It's not like you can't do this type of plan. You'll notice that the Power Zero book is very agnostic when it comes to the type of insurance you use. I think IUL works better, but we're certainly not going to say, turn you away if you want to do whole life. I know people have very strong feelings about that. The second question, is it worth it to get the securities license? I think it is, but that doesn't mean that you can't do this type of planning if you're not securities licensed. So we're not going to be talking a lot about infinite banking. That's just not really my sweet spot, but we are going to be showing you how to get $20,000 to $30,000 premiums, which is about everybody meet with. So I think Cody was right. It's going to cost you to come to this conference. It's going to cost you about 1/30th of a client, right? So just get 1/30th of a client that'll pay for your way to Nashville.
True. Amen to that. What other books should I be reading besides Power of Zero so I can understand this better?
You want to understand IUL better, you have to read my book, Look Before You LERP. That's all about IUL. Everything you need to know about IUL. That'll transform your IUL business.
Wow, Look Before You LERP. I didn't even mention that book earlier. How many books have you written?
I've written 5, and I actually just made an announcement yesterday. I've got a 6th one that's coming out. It's called The Guru Gap, how America's financial gurus are leading you astray and how to get back on track. That's going to be coming out in the fall. It's all about how to debunk Dave Ramsey, Susie Orman, Clark Howard, Ken Fisher, Amit Sethi, all of the things that they're doing and saying to lead people astray. So that's coming out in the fall. That's already written, but it takes these major publishers 6 months to just get the thing in the pipeline. So I'm very excited for that to hit the streets.
That is awesome. I did have one final question for those that are on. Look Before You LERP is what he said. How do you spell LERP?
LIRP.
LIRP. Okay, cool. I've got a Christian school education, so you got to help me out. Okay. Here's one question I had before we wrap it up. I would love to know if you are interested in the event. You haven't registered yet, but you would like a little bit more information or love to have a conversation related to the event and you're considering going, please type me in or yes, either way in chat, just so that I can make sure that I shoot you a text. Okay, cool. I'm actually just gonna. I'm going to try to make sure I get to everyone. Dave, what got you thinking about doing this event?
Well, we did one last year with Ed Slott. It was me and Ed Slott, 2 days, just all of the new tax law and how to utilize life insurance and integrate that with the new tax strategy. We wanted to sort of improve upon what we did last year. And so Ed Slott's still coming this year. He's not going to do quite as much time as he did last year. He's doing 2 hours this time. But we just wanted this to be a historic event. Nobody, the 4 of us have never been in the same place at the same time. So sort of like the vice president, the president, they never fly in the same plane. We have never been in the same building at once. So all 4 of us are going to be in the same stage, sharing the same podium. And it's just this it's never happened before. It's the alignment of the stars. So it's just, we want to do something big. We wanted to go big. We wanted to be historic. And we're just super excited about it.
I love that. Well,
Richard says we might need a bigger room.
that's a good problem to have. And he may be right. That's for sure. I love it. Well, buddy, I appreciate your time. I'm super excited that you are doing this specific event and that a lot of our audience can participate and learn and spend some time with you all. So thank you for spending some time tonight, pouring into us. And we look forward to seeing you in Nashville, May 16th and 17th.
Sounds great. Thank you, my friend.
Okay. Thank you, Dave. Appreciate you, buddy. And thank you guys for hanging out and listening to my buddy David McKnight on how to properly position IUL. Thanks for joining. Appreciate you being a part of tonight's webinar. You guys are amazing. If I can help you, shoot me an email, Cody Askins. Otherwise, have an amazing night, and we will see you soon. Adios. Hey, if you enjoyed this, I got another one you're going to love. It's right there. Click on it. See you in there. I'm so excited for today's CA Power Player podcast. I'm your host, Cody Askins. We got a special guest. He is back on the channel talking about how to sell life insurance from home. Here's what I love about this person. Okay, I'm telling you, this will be one of the best.